Good afternoon, everybody. I would like to welcome you all to the first Draper Lunchtime Expedition Program of 2019. It's a little weird. This is the first one we've done without Chuck. And yeah, it's odd. It's weird that he's not here, you know what I mean? So, but he's gone through our speaker lineup for the year and he approves, 2 thumbs up, so good stuff. So today we are lucky enough to have Zach Hutchinson from Audubon Rockies join us. So he's a community naturalist and is a master bander through the USGS, that's the US, is it Geological Survey? He coordinates the banding activities for Audubon Rockies, and prior to Audubon, he graduated with a degree in zoology from, I had to look this up, because I was like, what is that acronym? It was Northwest Missouri State University. He operated programs combining science, art, and kayaks. He served as an alligator conservation biologist and was a museum's operations director. He's authored The Great Wyoming Bird Trail, an app for guiding bird enthusiasts to finding birds in Wyoming. His passion with Audubon focuses on passion for conservation started from birth, and his personal life bravely reflects his work life. However, he has passion for international travel too, so keep that in mind if you're going anywhere. Maybe you want to bring a bird bander along. So without further ado, let's welcome Zach Hutchinson to the Draper. You can see the slides better.
All right, well, thanks for having me at your first presentation this year. This is pretty exciting for me. First off, the title is slightly misleading because it is bird banding in the Big Empty, but only one of the stations that Audubon Rockies operates, actually the nets spill into sagebrush steppes. So for the most part, I did that a little tongue-in-cheek, but we do run 5 different bird banding stations in Wyoming. So we'll talk about those. There are no big, grandiose conservation or research publications from any of this data yet. So you're not going to see anything here that's groundbreaking or that we've taken conservation action on yet. It's actually something that when I took over coordinating our bird banding efforts 2 years ago, I was trying to clean up our data collection system first and foremost and get ourselves right with USGS, and then start to work towards actually publishing on all of this amazing research that we're doing. Now, almost all of our bird banding efforts are collaborative, so the data is going into other organizations where then they're publishing using our data, but we ourselves have not published on it yet. However, coming down from the National Audubon Pipeline is a big initiative that will actually be able to use a lot of our data then to make large-scale conservation actions. So just a warning about what we're getting into. This is just a lot of surface stuff about our bird banding efforts in Wyoming. So as we go through these, all these photos that you see, these were taken by me, and as long as I remember, I'll try to identify whatever's on the screen, okay? So first off, for those of you who don't know, this is a northern saw-whet owl, and this is a female. Okay, so real quick, I gotta give you the breakdown of who is Audubon Rockies, just because I'm here as an employee of Audubon Rockies, right? So first off, Audubon Rockies is the regional office of the National Audubon Society, the people who send you a lot of emails and quite a few mailers, I'm sure, if you're a member. But our mission is pretty simple. We protect birds in the places they need today and tomorrow, okay? Very simple. Audubon, we protect birds, okay? And so, Audubon Rockies, we're in the Central Flyway, and so this highlights the Central Flyway, all the states in green, and then our head office is actually in Fort Collins, and then we have several field offices spread throughout our 3 state regions. So Audubon Rockies covers Colorado, Wyoming, and now Utah. So Utah has officially been adopted into Audubon Rockies, okay? Real quick, just on the Central Flyway, so Audubon breaks our country into 4 flyways. That way it helps how we prioritize conservation needs in each flyway. One of our conservation priorities is coasts, and obviously in Wyoming and in the Central Flyway, coasts are the big part of what we do. So that's why we break them down into 4 flyways. It also helps with administration, how we have our admins over flyways. So although there is a tiny bit of coast in the Central Flyway, but again, mostly the Central Flyway is not focused on coast. So this breaks down how each kind of guild of birds uses the flyways, and so you can see shorebirds over here on the left. You can follow the orange lines. Land birds like passerine songbirds in yellow. Seabirds are the green. You can see seabirds are mostly staying out, right, in the pelagic areas. Raptors in blue, and you can see one of the major raptor flyways, Western Wyoming, Kimmerer. If any of you have ever been to Hawkwatch, Kimmerer, okay? And then waterfowl, of course, use Mississippi Flyway especially, and then we get a few that leak over. If you've ever been to Central Colorado in wintertime, you'll see lots of Canada and cackling geese actually. So, okay, so breaking down us, like I said, our head office in Fort Collins. We have a field office in Pagosa Springs, field office on the western slope. This is me, I'm in Casper, that's where I have a field office, and then another field office near Moorcroft, Wyoming. We actually, the field office up there is on a ranch, and you can see Devil's Tower from their back porch, so they're in a good spot. I'm in Casper, I'm in a less good spot. So in our 3-state region, we have 19 chapters. We used to have more, as some of you probably know, the Meadowlark chapter is either defunct or dormant, let's say, for now. And so you can ignore that dot right there. There's no longer a chapter here in Cody. But we still have several chapters in the state. And then you can see most of our chapters fall in the Colorado region. It's more populated, that makes sense, right? So Audubon has 5 strategic priorities, but within our area, we only focus on the 4 because, again, coasts really doesn't apply to us in Wyoming. So working lands, water, bird-friendly communities, and climate. And so our working lands, we have a program called Conservation Ranching, which actually works with private landowners, okay, on making their ranch stay a ranch, okay, and using working lands to protect birds and their habitat, okay? And so we work with a lot of private landowners, and right now, Audubon Rockies, we have about close to 1 million acres enrolled in this program in our region. So it's pretty exciting. Western water, most of our western water right now is being done, our work on the Colorado River, so not a lot is happening in Wyoming yet, although I am working with Casper Advisory Group on improvements on the North Platte River. So we're doing some work a little bit in Wyoming, but not at the grand scale that's being done on the Colorado River. Bird-friendly communities, you may have heard of it. It's called Habitat Hero. It's the program we run as part of bird-friendly communities. And basically it's turning communities back from green, mowed grass, non-native grasses into habitat that can be used by pollinators, birds, and other wildlife, okay? So that's bird-friendly communities, and then we've got a lot of climate science going on. It's mostly by our national team in New York and Washington, D.C., and so they're doing a lot with climate change models right now. Just real quick, I'll throw this up, and then I'll put it up again at the end for anyone who has interest in contacting us, but all the ways to reach us, my email, we have Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and a website, and we do a monthly newsletter, so you can sign up for the newsletter at the website up there, okay? All right, let's get to the fun stuff. So first, we'll talk about map spanning. Map spanning was started in 1989, and again, it's a collaborative effort. It's not run by one group, but it requires lots of operators willing to put in the time and contribute data to a single place where then that data can be accessed by all the collaborators, other researchers, and then the group that actually operates it, IBP, the Institute for Bird Populations. So what is MAPS? It's just an acronym, right? Everything's an acronym anymore. Monitoring avian productivity and survivorship. Okay, we call these vital rates. We're looking at how songbirds, passerines, how are they producing new young, okay, and then are those young birds surviving into an age where then they're also producing. And we're looking at survivorship of adults as well. So a lot of things we're looking at, and you'll see some of the big ideas that we've learned from this. Anyone know the bird in the background there? Yellow warbler, right? One of our common summertime birds, that beautiful sweet song they sing. This is an adult male that actually, I captured this one in Powell. I was banding with a high school group last summer out of Powell, so that's when it actually was captured real close. So, what is it? It's continent-wide. Like I said, lots of collaborators, over 1,200 stations since 1989 that have opened up. In Wyoming, there for a while, there were not that many, and then last year, 3 more opened up, or 4 more opened up in the state. So now we have 10 or 11 map stations operating in Wyoming, which is great, and we have some higher elevation ones, which is exciting as well. We have one in Yellowstone now too, so closer to you folks. And I actually don't have contact information because the collaboration, we don't share contacts of who's doing within our states, we just all contribute data into this system. So if you are interested in it, I know it's operated by someone who works for Yellowstone National Park. So if you're interested in it, that's who you want to reach out to, okay? So since it started, we've had 2 million bird recaptures. My slide got all cattywampus here. 2 million bird recaptures. Now why is that important? The initial capture is great, we get data off of it, but it's recapture data that then helps us understand survivorship, right? We don't know if a bird survived if we never see it again. It could have survived and just gone somewhere else. It could have died, and we would never know, right? So recapture data is helpful for us understanding within the demographics we're looking at, are birds surviving from first year to second year, from their second year of life well into their 4th, 5th year, etc. Okay? And then we're getting data for important questions that are out there. So like with population declines, what's causing it? Is it in adult birds and they aren't producing anymore? If anyone remembers back to the DDT issues, right? It wasn't affecting adults directly, it was affecting eggshells and causing productivity to bottom out, right? So this type of study allows us to see where's the issue. Are we not catching any young birds? Because if we're not catching any young birds, right, then we can start to look, where is the disconnect? So it helps us to answer those big questions, okay? And so back to the vital rates, like I said, that's what we're looking at. It's all about the vital rates, okay? And so we're looking deeply into that, and this is happening across the country, and now even MAPS has started to reach into Central and South America, where we're doing what's called MOSI, and it's essentially MAPS, but for our birds wintering now in Central and South America. Okay, so we're getting them at 2 stages of their life cycle, their breeding and their wintering. Okay, anyone know this one? I heard several. McGillivray's is correct. You said it. McGillivray's warbler. This is an adult male McGillivray's warbler. So, gorgeous bird. One interesting thing we're seeing with these, one of our banding stations is actually on an area that burned 12 years ago on Casper Mountain, and we're actually starting to see these decline because all the lodge poles are coming back. And so they liked it when the lodge poles were really young. Now that the lodge poles are about my height or taller, they're starting to move out of the areas where they were thicker. So we'll have more data years down the road. That station's only been around for 2 years. So, okay, so some of the big things we've learned from MAPS. Survival can be more important than productivity. So the survival of adult birds and first-year birds, whether it be for migration or the wintering grounds or whatever, their survival, okay, can actually be more important than a drop in productivity when you're looking at population declines. So if we have low survivorship, it could actually increase the rate of population decline. Carryover effect. So birds who are experiencing degraded habitat along migration routes and or wintering grounds. Carryover effect means if they're experiencing bad things there, it can impact their productivity the following summer. And so we're starting to see effects from that. And then this last one, it's pretty broad, but I know there was a large study done that actually showed how closely our land birds in North America are tied to El Nino. So, and that study came from MAPS data, showing that the big El Nino years, we have huge bursts in population in land birds. Seabirds suffer, land birds explode. And then as we cycle out, land birds dip, seabirds pop up, okay? And so the MAPS data is actually what helps us to get some of this information, which is important when you're planning for how is climate and weather impacting our birds, especially like you're talking about endangered birds, and we're trying to protect their areas. We need to know how their populations are going to respond certain years, okay? Oh, sorry. Anyone know that one?
Violet green.
Violet green swallow. Wonderful, wonderful. Got some bird people in the crowd. Another one of the big ones is West Nile virus. So they're finding that West Nile is actually laying waste to a lot more birds than we realized. And so this study, I haven't read it yet. It's just recently come out, but it's a lot worse than they initially thought. I read the synopsis of it, and it's pretty impactful. So again, MAPS data helped us to learn this information. Here, this is an adult male Bullock's oriole. Bullock's oriole. Okay. All right. What was that?
Except northern also.
Yeah, I mean that's the old name, right? Before they got split up. Okay, so how does it work? It's all about, with all of these projects I'm going to show you, it's all about standardizing protocols. We want everyone doing the same thing and putting in the same amount of effort, because a lot of this data then depends on the effort to understand. If everyone's doing, one person's running one net, one person's running 30 nets, and they're each doing a different time, you don't get data then that's usable. So everyone uses the same protocols. We all have a thick guide that IBP sends out to us every year, and it says, here's how we're doing it. If you're in this region, do it this way. If you're in this region, do it that way. So we all run it. We set up 10 nets, essentially a minimum 10 nets they're about 10 feet high, 30 feet long. We don't use standard system, we use metric, but just for you guys to give you a picture, 10 feet tall, 30 feet long, we use 10 of those, okay? We run from 6 a.m. to noon. We try to put in at least 6 hours every time we band. In Wyoming, we have 7 banding periods starting May 31st through August 10th. And so every 10-day, we have a 10-day window, 10-day window, and we band once in each 10-day window from the 31st until the 10th, okay? And so what we do, we set up the nets, we capture the birds, we put on a small aluminum leg band that's issued by USGS. We get age, sex, injuries, weight, we take measurements of the wing and tail, we get all that information, we write it all down, and then it goes into a computer database, okay? All the birds leave unharmed, okay? If you look at bird banding caused mortalities worldwide, it's less than 0.09% of the birds that are caught and banded have injury or mortality, okay? So it's very, as long as you've been well trained, and you can't do this without being well trained, mortality is not a major issue, okay? So we get all that information and we release the birds. Pretty simple. It's really cool to see how we age the birds, which is a question I often get. We actually use the feathers. So birds grow their feathers in a very specific pattern at very different times of their life. Now, different birds do it differently, but passerines, songbirds, okay, they almost all do a very similar pattern. And so we can actually tell the age of a bird based on how its feathers appear in hand, especially. You can do it with some birds, just you get a photograph in the field, you can age them. I'm sure if any of you come to some of the raptor talks, with raptors, sometimes it's easier to age them if you've got a nice spread wing shot of them flying over, but with songbirds in the hand. We can age them, some of them, up to 4 years of age. And then after that, we rely on the recapture data. So if we band a bird that we know is 4 years old, and then we capture it 4 years later, we know it's 8 years old, okay? And so that's how this works. That's why that recapture data is so important. This is a special treat. You don't often get to see this in the field with this bird that's up here. This is an orange-crowned warbler, okay? And the orange crown usually doesn't show up when you're just looking at it through the end of a camera or binoculars, but you can just barely make out the little orange crown. Clearly that bird was named by, a naturalist who had killed it and was describing it in hand, because in the field, I don't think anyone would have named that bird orange-crowned warbler. All right, so where are our stations? These are the 5 that Audubon Rockies runs. Okay, the blue are our map stations, the red is our owl station, and then these gray ones over here are map stations operated by other operators. Teton Science School has one. Like I said, the one in Yellowstone just opened up 2018. I didn't even know it opened up until 2 months ago. And then these 3 opened up last year as well. So this is Teton Science School. This is the Yellowstone one. I'm not sure about this one. I think it's in Jackson. Someone operates that one. So those are the stations we run. This is the one up near Moorcroft. This is at Keyhole State Park. This one's on the North Platte River at Ennis Kimball Wilkins State Park. One on Casper Mountain. And then this one is on a private ranch down just below Centennial. It's actually the same site. If you've read about the Wyoming toad introduction, right, all the work, we band in the same place they're doing the toad releases and rearing. So while we're out there banding birds, U.S. Fish and Wildlife is out there working with tadpoles and toads, and we get to see the toads quite frequently. It's nice. You're walking out in these tall willows, and there's moose everywhere, and you got to watch out because the mama moose has charged us a few times. She doesn't like us being out there. And then so there's moose, there's birds, and then boom, Wyoming toads right there. It's a magical spot. Until you get 30 mosquito bites, and then it's less magical. Okay, so just a quick breakdown of the little bit of data that I have from our station. The station that I started in Ennis Kimball Wilkins State Park, it's only been there for 3 years. We don't have enough data to really make any sort of big inferences yet. One of the things when I took over that I wanted to fix was just the fact that we weren't using our data ourselves. We were just sending it in as part of collaboration. And so one of my goals is to actually use our data to help make conservation decisions in Wyoming. So I'm just starting to get enough data from this. We have 2 other stations where we have 10 plus years of data and it needs to be used. And so that is something I'm working on now that I've gotten it cleaned up to the point where it can actually be used. So just a quick breakdown. At our station in 3 years, this is our breakdown of sex. Unknowns, how would we not know? So when a bird is very young, generally you cannot tell the sex of most passerines when they're fresh out of the nest, okay? Normally what they have to go through what we call the preformative molt. So if you think of your formative years, it's like your teenage years, right? So the preformative molt is where they go from being a baby bird to a teenage bird, okay? And so until that point where they are teenage-ish, they all look the same, all right? They're all just amorphous blobs of color until that preformative molt, okay? And so most of those birds that fall on that unknown side of the chart there, those are hatchier birds. They were born within weeks of us capturing them. And so you just can't tell sex at that point. Some birds you can, but most of them you can't. So we've been catching more males. And if I'm thinking correctly, we actually, our first year we caught more females, and then the past 2 years we've caught more males. And so obviously I need more than 3 years of data to tell you why, or if it's even a trend yet. So we'll see. So here's, here you go. Here's our trends. I said that backwards. So we're catching more hatchier birds lately with an unknown sex, whereas the males and females are declining, the numbers that we're catching, but the males still, you see that first year? The first year we caught pretty much the same, and then the males females, they both went up and then they're dipping, right? But we're still catching significantly more males now than we were. So the why, we don't know yet, okay? We're just too new into this to have any sort of ideas as to why. I've got some incomplete data here because I'm still waiting on 2 years of data from one of our stations, and so the blue line isn't complete. But you can see they're all kind of, if the blue line follows the same trend that the other two stations are doing, that we've had an uptick since 2016 that the number of birds we're catching. So I moved here in 2014, so in 2015, I started banding in 2016. So the year 2015, we had a strong El Nino. And you can see the populations responded the 2 years after that. Now, what will we see next year? Undetermined. I don't know. Probably down, right? We would expect it, but we'll see. We'll see what happens. Our purple line here, this is, I'm not sure how to take this. This purple line scares me a little bit. We caught 72 birds at our high elevation station in that zone of previous fire. So we caught 72 birds in 2017. Last year we caught 35 birds. We went way down in our number of captures. We went way down in our number of sightings, and just the diversity of species that we were experiencing. So why did that happen? I don't know, but it scared me significantly. Now we had a dry year around Casper, but it was just unusual what was happening. Now again, this is a fire that came through in 2006, and so just now the lodge poles are starting to get to be tall, but they're in that stage where they're not tall enough for birds that prefer thick lodgepole forests, but they're also starting to be too tall, and they're starting to thin out because they're outcompeting each other, right? They're going to be too thinned out for birds that prefer thick cover, like the McGillivray's warbler. So I'm not sure what we're seeing here yet. We need more data. But as of right now, I mean, this is where we're sitting. So I was pretty disheartened. It was a very slow year on the mountain as far as bird captures, except for hummingbirds. But we don't ban hummingbirds as part of the MAPS effort. We only banned passerines. So the hummingbirds are part of a different study that I will show you in a little bit. We'll talk about briefly. Okay, so our next collaborative effort that we're operating in Wyoming is Project Owlnet. And so Project Owlnet, again, nationwide effort using standardized protocols to focus on life history of a very secretive owl, the northern saw-whet owl, which was the first photo you saw up there, okay? And so we banned other owls as part of it too, but Project Owlnet specifically focuses on northern saw-whet owls. Like I said, we do ban other owls. There's a long-eared owl, okay? So this was founded in 1994. It's the brainchild of David Brinker and Scott Wiedensaw. So most northern saw-whet owls migrate and winter in eastern North America, but we did not have a lot of information as to how northern saw-whet owls were migrating and using habitat in the Rockies. So there's a lot of stations on the west coast, a lot of stations on the east coast, but in the Rockies there were very few. And so we didn't know, what habitat are they using when they migrate through here? Are they migrating through here? And so that's what we were looking at, okay? And again, it's all about standardized protocols, everyone doing the same thing so that the data is useful to collaborators, to researchers, to conservation organizations, okay? This photo here, so if you did not know, most owls' feathers will fluoresce pink under black light, okay? It's a chemical called porphyrin, and when the feather erupts from the shaft, as it's growing, right, it erupts from the shaft, it's covered in that chemical, and it slowly wears off over time, and so you can tell new feathers versus old feathers based on, are they pink or are they not? So these are older feathers than these. These are fresh new feathers right here. These are really old, these are medium old, these are really new. So this would be newest, newer, old, if we were doing like a molt card. Oh, actually, oldest, these are going to be, so newest, newer, old, oldest. So we've got 4 generations of feathers in this wing, and so from that, we can age that bird, okay? So what are the goals of Project Owlnet? Now again, these are the nationwide goals because we're collaborating on this project. We've got our own research goals with it, but Project Owlnet, we're focusing on getting data for that project first and foremost. It's getting this network set up, because it's still fairly young, getting that standardized protocol to be used across this network and just across owl banders in general, okay? And then improving communication coordination among that collaborative network. What you're seeing right now, anyone know what that is? That's the ear. That is the ear opening of a northern saw-whet owl. It is behind the eyeball, okay? And so owls they can either and or have asymmetrical ear openings, asymmetrical ears, both, or some have neither, okay? So it just depends on which owl it is, but so asymmetrical ear openings mean where's the flap, right? We think of our external ears, right? So where are the flaps? So on some, the flaps are crooked. On some, the flaps are straight, and the actual ear holes into the skull are crooked, and then it gives their head an actual asymmetrical shape, like the barn owl. You ever see a barn owl skull? It don't look right? It just looks unusual. It looks like someone hit one side of their face with a hammer. And so some owls, asymmetrical ear openings, some owls, asymmetrical ears, some owls both, some owls neither, okay? With northern saw-whet owls, their ear openings are asymmetrical, slightly, and then their actual ears are just barely asymmetrical, but it's not by much. Their skull is not deformed that greatly, okay? And so what we've learned so far, we've been running this station for just a couple years in Wyoming. I'm making a bold statement here because I would like more data, but after spending 2 years and having 0 captures in riparian habitat along the Platte River and having many captures on Casper Mountain, less than 10 miles away, I feel safe in saying that it seems like northern saw-whet owls have little to no desire to use lowland riparian habitat, at least in central Wyoming. So if there's a choice, they will pick higher elevation coniferous habitat. We caught one owl banding near the North Platte River. It was an eastern screech owl, and then all of our northern saw-whet owls have been on Casper Mountain. So, and we're banding, same night, same weather, same protocols, and we're getting 0 captures to getting 4 captures a night elsewhere, okay? So it seems like, at least in Wyoming, our owls, our northern saw-whet owls, the majority are using higher elevation coniferous habitat to migrate. A lot of folks know that we have a resident population of northern saw-whet owls in the state. Those owls, are they moving? Are they staying? We don't know yet. So to determine that, I need to get nesting birds and I need to get trackers on them. And so that's one of the futures of this project, is then to look at our resident birds. Are they sticking around or are they moving? Okay. Most of the owls we've caught, we have had 0 recaptures of birds we've caught so far. Now, if it were a resident bird staying on territory through the winter, you would expect to recapture it over the course of 6 weeks. We're not. And so all the birds we've caught so far, we're fairly certain are birds just migrating through. They're mostly younger birds, they're mostly female, okay? And it seems like they're all just passing through. So as this study progresses and we get transmitters on birds, we'll be able to have a better picture of what are the owls doing in our area, okay? Some of our other banding efforts that we are hoping to do or have done, so by 2020, my goal is to have at least 1, maybe 2 hummingbird monitoring stations in the state, okay? There are hummingbird research efforts going on in the state right now, but I actually want to be a part of another collaborative effort monitoring hummingbirds in the western part of the United States. Ruby-throated hummingbirds in the east, well monitored, well studied. In the west, we have a lot more species, right? And we have a lot more space to cover, and so that's one of our goals. The bird up on the screen right now, this is an adult male black-chinned hummingbird. Outside of the U.S., we're working with partners in Mexico, Central America, South America. In 2018, I actually spent 6 weeks in Peru teaching students at 5 different universities, some bird banding techniques, learning some stuff from them as well, and working on some collaborative efforts there. There's actually a project going on in Paracas, Peru, where they're actually banding and flagging shorebirds that summer in North America and winter in Peru. So working with them. And by 2021, one of our goals is that we will actually bring some of those banders from Central and South America to Wyoming to work with us, where we will help to train them, especially on birds that they're getting down there that are our wintering passerines and that are summering up here. Okay, so that is our goal by 2021, to bring some of them up here and to train them, because their research in Peru is going to be vital to understanding our bird populations in the U.S. All right, so one more time, that's our mission. Just a nice little bow on it. Why are we doing all this? Because this research, when done correctly and over enough time, it's going to help us make conservation decisions. Okay, that should be the goal of research, not just research for research's sake, but research to actually understand bird populations and how can we then make positive impacts. Okay, we're required to show all of our photo credits, but I took all the photos. So some of them are photos that I took personally for myself, and then some of them were on work time, and so got my personal site up there, and then Audubon Rockies for personal ones. If you want to see some more of my photo work, including from Peru and some of my other travels, that's my personal website, flockingaround.com. That bird up there, that I forget it's funny sometimes. That's a adult male Lucifer hummingbird. Okay.
So slide 30 said it was a warbler, and you said it was a hummingbird.
Oh, was it off? It might be off. Oh, yeah, it should be black-chinned hummingbird. That's a typo. That's a typo. It was a black-chinned hummingbird, not a black-chinned warbler. So, all right. If you want to contact Audubon Rockies for any reason, follow us, sign up for our newsletter. All that contact information's up there. I've got cards up here too, if you're a business card person. And with that, I think I finished right on time for questions.
Perfect.
Okay, all right, so questions. What do you guys got? All right, yeah.
You moved here from Northwest Missouri, and is that right?
So no, after college, I actually went to Texas. That's where I worked with alligators. Yeah, right. big difference. And from Texas, I moved to Casper.
But you were in Northwest Missouri when you
In my studies, yes.
Yes, and then you moved to Wyoming eventually.
Right.
I mean, what was the biggest difference between bird watching here and bird watching on the Missouri River?
So I actually was not a bird person in Missouri. I actually got into birds while I was working with alligators. Working with an animal with 80 teeth and 3,000 pounds of bite force will make you want to change careers. It just beats your body to scraps every single day. It was actually the day I was like, man, this is fun, but it's a toll. I was working in 110-degree weather. I was in a hazmat suit in an oil refinery, and they had just drained all of their canals, their cooling canals, and I caught 12 alligators from 6 to 8 foot that day. And I was about to have a heat stroke because it was so hot, and these alligators were so angry at me. So that's actually when I got into birds, was living in Texas, being near High Island. So yeah, I didn't bird watch when I was in Missouri. So I couldn't tell you an answer to that. I can't give you an honest assessment. Sorry.
It's all right.
Yeah. Yep.
How did it, so for the winter area of Peru, you already went into this knowing that Peru was a hot spot for birds to come from Wyoming to there, or, so kind of that's the first part, and the second part is, are you hoping to go to other countries that may be recipients of our birds in the winter?
I am hoping to do more, to actually start some research stations in Central and South America, getting Mosey stations set up, collaborating in those areas. I actually went to Peru just for training, and while I was there, I was in a shade-grown coffee farm, and there were western wood peewees, and so it was exciting for me in that moment. Hey, western wood peewees are only in one half of the country. That means like these could be some of our peewees, right? And so it was at that time that I was like, we need to work with these students who are the future biologists in Peru, to teach them about, you know, the birds that are summering here, so they have a full understanding of life cycle, right? And so it was at that time I started to realize that importance, because a lot of our summering songbirds, we don't know where our individual populations are going, because there's just not a lot of tracking efforts right now, tracking efforts. And so one of my goals in the next 3 years, we're writing our strategic plan right now, is to actually get tracking devices on our passerings. So finding out where our yellow warblers wintering, where our McGillivray's warblers wintering, most of which I would guess are going to winter along the west coast of Mexico, in the mountain ranges along there. But some of them clearly are going further south, like western wood peewees, which are a long distance migrant. You can tell that just from banding them. Western wood peewees have extremely long wings for their body size. Why? They're long distance migrants. So it wasn't until after I was already down there and doing the training that I realized there might be some importance here to setting up monitoring stations down here as well. So, good question. Yeah?
Some years ago, I had an owl follow me at 8,600 feet, just 2 miles east of Yellowstone National Park.
Mhm.
I can't remember if I was horseback or afoot, but either way, it was a small to medium-sized owl that was just after sundown, and he kept following me for about a half a mile, like he was curious about me. Why was he following?
Great question. So, no, it's a great question, and I actually think I have a decent answer. So small owls are usually songbird predators. The northern saw-whet owl is less so. I would guess, since this was right around sundown, my guess is this was northern pygmy owl. You were being followed by northern pygmy owl, which are not afraid of humans, at least not terribly. It was either that or a boreal owl. And my thought is, well, you said, what elevation were you at?
8,600 feet.
8,600? I would guess pygmy. I would guess pygmy owl. Pygmy owls are songbird hunters. So what I would guess it was doing was using you as the flush. So you flush songbirds, it chases them down to eat you. I mean, it seems like I've seen it. I've seen it with other birds. You know, you think about if anyone here has ever, you know, seen a farmer, you know, harvest his field, right? The predators will wait for, you know, scurrying prey. They understand that, you know, using a larger, you know, do they think of us as humans or just another animal, right? Hey, I'll use that to help me hunt. And so I would guess that's what was happening. You could have also been near a nest, but if it wasn't swooping on you, I would guess it was following you, using you as a tool.
It was keeping close.
Yeah, that's what it sounds like to me. I've seen smaller songbird hunters use humans before. I mean, if anyone has bird feeders and has ever had a sharp-shinned hawk, Cooper's hawk, goshawk come in, or using your feeders to bait in birds, then they've got, you know, easy buffet. So that would be my guess. Good question. Yeah. Yeah, that's a good question. Any others? Yeah.
This isn't about banding, but the Wyoming birders are saying we don't have hawks this winter, possibly because the mouse population is down. Do you know if they're seeing hawks somewhere else in larger numbers?
So great question. Okay, so I see this every year. It's usually, you know, it's usually posted as a broad question across some of the user groups of birders in Wyoming. Where are the rough-legged hawks? Why aren't we seeing this year versus others? And oftentimes, you know, someone wants to throw in an opinion about, well, we have a low mouse population this year. It's often not that cut and dry. With rough-legged hawks, it could be that they're just having a booming lemming population, and so right now they don't need to come south, right? They don't need to push down into Wyoming because in their home territory, they're able just to scatter out slightly and have enough food to sustain their population where they don't have to spread out. It's the same if any of you follow snowy owl cycles. You know, we'll have the eruption years of snowy owls, right? Well, this year, it's not an eruption year. It was actually a little bit of a slower year because lemming populations are up right now and they're doing fine. And there were less chicks because the cycles are slightly offset, right? The lemmings pop, boom, snowy owls boom shortly after, then the lemmings dive, and the snowy owls dive, right? And they follow each other like that. If you've ever seen if you ever took ecology classes or any kind, they used to demonstrate it more with lynx and snowshoe hare populations. But it's predator-prey cycles, very similar. So with the rough-legged hawks, they share very similar northern habitat with snowy owls and prey cycles with snowy owls. And so rough-legged hawks are doing a very similar thing. In the east, they see snowy owls during snowy owl eruption years, and during snowy owl eruption years in the east, we usually see rough-legged hawks eruption years. So it's all just tied to that prey cycle further north, not necessarily tied to us. Great question. Great question. Yes, sir.
Dumb question, non-birders. What is El Nino coming and the bird population goes up? Tell me why.
Okay. I don't know if there was a why in that research paper. I think that was going to be a following study, but I think the thought among most of us is that when El Nino comes, we usually have wetter springs and early summers, which again, following that cyclical pattern of predator-prey, a wet spring and early summer means higher caterpillar numbers, right? And so the wetness allows for more foliage, which allows for more insect populations, and one of the big insects that are used to feed young birds or caterpillars. So I think the dominant thought right now is the wet cycle that El Nino brings, which if you're a nesting bird on bare ground on an island, a seabird, all that water is going to flood out your nests, which that's why it hurts seabirds. But all that water coming across the continent with arboreal land birds, they're in a place where the water doesn't affect them, but it increases their food, and so then their population follows the insect populations that are tied to the El Nino cycle. Now, with land birds that nest on the ground, during that El Nino summer, we had hard crashes in longspurs, horned larks, and meadowlarks because all their nests got flooded out. It's so different land birds. I painted with a broad brush when I made that statement, but land birds that nest in trees and brush versus land birds that nest on the ground, and songbirds at least, different response. But that is the leading thought, is that the food sources are increasing due to increased moisture. Great question. Thank you.
About the kestrels, we built a kestrel box, but we've never had them come. We had a kestrel come into the bird feeder last summer. We had robins nesting up above, and he sat on our fence with a bird feeder, and the robin dive bombed him several times. He gave up, but I know that there's a kestrel sign from Idaho. And I just wondered if you knew anything about the kestrel population in this area. Is it still struggling?
So the question was, how are the kestrel populations doing in this area? And so that is one thing I don't know. I will tell you, I'm working with a group in Powell because I'm actually interested in that question. The high school group, one of the science classes over there, they put up 6 kestrel boxes last year, and they're going to try to put up more in coming years, and we're going to start to try to monitor the population. Kestrel populations in the whole U.S. are declining, somewhat dramatically in certain areas. One of the leading thoughts there is, so kestrels in the summertime when they're breeding, one of their main food sources is actually grasshoppers. They're for a falcon, they're kind of wussy. They're hunting grasshoppers. How hard is it to hunt a grasshopper, right? But that's one of their main food sources. And so in farming communities especially, the use of pesticides is affecting the grasshoppers, which is of course affecting the kestrels. And so it's one of those things where they know there's a decline from other studies. In this area, I am not sure. And that's why I'm focused on Powell and eventually going to try to include Worland, because big farming communities. And so we have kestrels in those areas. I want to see what they're doing. We're going to do blood work on the chicks to find out, are pesticides being passed on, through the food sources. We're going to look at all that. So right now, we just started it last year. It's just in the early baby steps. I didn't even mention it here because we haven't even had a kestrel look at our boxes yet, right? So.
We had blackbirds nested in the Kestrel box.
Yeah, you'll get blackbirds, you'll get starlings, you'll get screech owls, and so it's a great question, and I don't have an answer because no one is doing something in this area yet.
Did he hunt around, read about